Ladies and gentlemen, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Hello and welcome to Down the Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice while doing our best to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. I'm Joanne Shaw, owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design, and with me is my co-host and co-author, Matthew Dressing.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Matthew Dressing, owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. As landscape designers and gardeners, we believe it's important and possible to have great gardens, which are sustainable and low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen.
That's right, and spring is here, and the warmer weather is almost upon us. And with many spring bulbs cheerfully telling us we're all starting to head out into our gardens. Tonight, it's our May in the Garden episode, and we're going to talk all about the do's and don'ts in your May garden. What garden projects are you looking forward to this May? Have you started working out in your yard or garden yet? You can rate us at downthegardenpathpodcast@hotmail.com. And don't forget to stick around for the end of the show for our new Stepping Stone segment, where we will answer more listener questions and give you timely tips for your garden and landscapes, even though the whole show will be all about timely tips and garden and landscapes. Right, Matt?
That's right. That's right. So thank you, everybody who was tuning in the last couple of weeks while we were away. For me, school was ending, and Joanne was jet setting around the world.
Well,
Visiting.
just to Spain. I just went to Spain, but Nat was deep in having to do exam time and final reports for his students and getting them ready for the summer. So yes, and I got to see some gardens in Spain. It was very cool. Very nice. So I was shocked at how many of the plants, like, when you travel, you see like tropical, like our house plants, right, as plants. I don't want to talk the whole show about Spain, although I could, but they had catmint and they had irises and like they had all of our plants. But Matt, they were all blooming at the same time. It was so weird to see like rose bushes just blooming and irises and catmint but other spring things that are escaping me at the moment, like it was kind of really interesting.
It sounds like all the seasons were just kind of overlapping and bleeding together in parts.
Yeah, I think so. And I think because it gets so hot, I'm guessing that that's their garden season. And then after May, I think it just gets too hot. And I bet the plants don't do well, because we even went to an area, again, I don't want to talk the whole show, everybody, about it, but called, I'm going to say it wrong, Cordoba. And so this was like a walled in kind of city. So you went into these neighborhoods. And it's all concrete, right? Concrete walls and stuff, all one or maybe two levels, right? So just two levels. And they had a garden. So we happened to be there, and our driver happened to be like into gardening. So he's like, I want you to see, like, we've got time before we meet your guide. I want you to see how the locals live and their patios. And there's actually a garden tour of a patio tour. And he's like saying, he's driving and he's saying patio tour. And I'm thinking, does that mean something different in Spanish? Like, am I missing something? But it really was a patio tour, Matt. So we got to go. So there were only 5 homes on the tour, and we got to go in 2 of them, and one we could see through because they were breaking for some repairs or some fixing and watering and stuff. So it was very cool to see. So really, it's like the main floor of their home in the center is their patio. And it's like, and so then their whole house kind of surrounds looking down on the patio. So they've gone up on walls and all the containers on walls. And it was very, very wonderful to see. So that's where it was a lot of annuals. Like, he knew what geraniums were. He knew what all the annuals, were that we have here, as what they had. And then they also had a competition. So that was a competition for their patio, but they had the front of the house, instead of at their door, they all had 2nd story terraces. So they had plants on the terraces as a competition. So a lot of like these windows with, cascading geraniums out of them. And it was very interesting. So it was neat to see when on the outside, it didn't really look like a plant-friendly community, but the fact that they had them inside their home was almost better, right? Because you were always around them.
That's the kind of garden I want. Right there
Yeah.
indoors, all
Yeah.
the annuals and things. Nice
Yeah.
big open space, fresh
I
air.
know, seriously. And they literally were watering. They showed us how they watered, and it was like it was a big can on the end of a stick. And they literally would fill it in, like fill the can with a bucket, and then they would that's how they watered. Like, and I'm not talking watering can, like I'm talking like a can of tomatoes can. And that's how they watered the plants up high. It was very, very cute. I'll send you some pictures because I did take
Oh
some pictures of
wow.
that. Yeah, so it was very neat. So it was wonderful to see the country, but it was also wonderful to be a country that really takes pride in the land and their flowers and the beauty of it all. So yeah, so it was great.
Oh, sounds like a great trip. And that was one of James' first questions. He said, "Hello, Joanne. Welcome back here to the cold. How was your trip?" So
Yes.
hopefully, there you go, James. She had a wonderful trip and some beautiful gardens to see as well. So that's amazing. Yeah, I would
Mhm.
love to have kind of like that central patio or central courtyard in the middle of my house and just see the weather come and go and plant them and all the color that just is in like every surrounding room or view from all the
Yes.
surrounding rooms would be wonderful.
Yeah, it was really, and you never, like, it didn't even, like, I didn't know that, right? When you see the homes, you don't realize what's inside until you realize. So yeah, so that was really neat. And a lot have rooftop gardens as well, because they'd be, let's if they're 3 or 4 stories, so then there'll be like a shared rooftop gardens above. So and anybody who had balconies, oh my gosh, they made use of those balconies for the most part. So yeah,
You'll have to send me some
definitely.
pictures of their balconies.
Oh yeah.
Have
Oh,
to-
I will. Oh my gosh, Matt. Yeah, yeah, I will. I will.
I'll put a Spanish flair on my balcony.
That's right. That's right.
Really
So,
up the game.
so yeah. So thank you everybody for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our 2 of our favorite shows, which is why we replayed them during this busy season for Matt and I, or well, I guess busy season for Matt and not so busy for me. But we're glad to be back, and we're glad to talk about May. And I know while I was away, there was like a few days of really nice weather, and everybody freaked out, right, about getting out into the garden. And oh my gosh, I'm seeing all the posts about, oh, I've been to the nursery and they don't have any lilacs and they don't have any of this, and it's like, oh please. So I put a post out saying, people, it's patience. You probably know more about how the schedule goes, right? Like the schedule for plant deliveries is last fall. Like they booked the trucks last fall, so it doesn't matter like if spring came a month early, those trucks are still not coming, right?
Yeah, the plant orders are going in August. They're booking trucks by October, and they're setting them up for all the weeks ahead of time before even Christmas comes. We basically know who's showing up when and what's on each load. So the nurseries will get it. It will
Yes.
all come. Nurseries are getting some stuff in. I've seen roses out. I've seen some trees, lots and lots of evergreens. But that deciduous stuff we want to be careful with because a burst of weather like we've seen in our garden, right? We've got some leaves coming out already, but if we get a good hard hit, that's going to set our plants or damage our plants or burn off
Hmm.
flowers.
Yeah.
So, yes, remember it's still the end of April.
I
So,
know, I know.
lots
Well,
of,
we can all remember the, like, especially those poor, sad, hydrangeas that you shouldn't buy anyway, but the macrophilia ones, right? They get nipped and they get those, black leaves. Like the
mhm.
nurseries can't sell them. Um, Other tender things like Japanese maples, like they don't even bring them in until they can, they may bring them in if they have a protected area in their nursery, but if they don't, then they're not coming up until the end of May, beginning of June, right? Because they're just too
Yeah.
valuable to get damaged.
Yeah, they are one of the last ones to land before that May 2/4 weekend. And again,
Yeah.
weather dependent, they might push it off, or if they have to take the truck, you hope that they have a spot.
Yeah.
I was at the nursery, my old nursery, just on the weekend actually, and they were bringing in 2 skids of Japanese maples that were left over from last year, and
Mm.
they were in full leaf. They were completely out with that little burst of heat that we had. So yeah, it's a lot of work to bring them in and find space and yeah.
Yeah,
So
but they
they
would
will
probably
bring
keep
them
them
in.
inside though, right? They weren't going to put them. Did they put them out in the beds?
They were just putting them out so that they were warm and they were getting air. But
Right.
not displaying them enough because they need to bring them in every night. So
Right.
yeah. So excuse the appearance of your favorite garden center. They're working hard to get you everything. You won't miss out. Make sure you're on
Right.
their newsletters and their email list. But know that that little burst was a little tease indeed. So,
I had hail today here in Pickering. What about you? Did you see any weather? Oh,
it
you were
got
in Bel.
dark.
Yeah, you were away.
Yeah, it got dark and we could see it far away in the west. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
nothing. And now that I'm home, it may have actually made it there. But yeah, we had nothing really. I heard there was some rain here, but where I'm in Oshawa, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it came out really hard, and then all of a sudden I look out and it's like, oh wait, it's like staying on the cars, right? It looks like hail, so not damaging hail, but still, I mean, that just shows you how unpredictable the weather is, and that's
Yes.
the most predictable thing about spring is that it's unpredictable.
But it's unpredictable.
That's
Exactly.
unpredictable, right? and there's no hurry and there's no rush, and really to enjoy, what you've, watching it start. It was lovely to come home and see my daffodils all blooming and stuff like that. So I was worried that with the heat I heard about, I thought, oh no, they're all going to be done by the time I got home, but it cooled back down, so that's good.
Yeah. They drove them up and then just cooled right to hold them. It was
That's
perfect.
Right. That's good. So Kelly's already asked, we should definitely start about lawns, because Kelly's asked, okay, can I rake now? What should I be putting on my grass now? So Matt.
You know what? Spring cleanups are out there. I've seen a lot of crews in the last 2 weeks. They're doing it. I know they're gathering leaves. I have seen ladybugs have been awake and moving, and I've seen some other beneficials kind of out and about with that good solid 5 or so days that we've had. So, I mean, again, I would leave it just in case anyone's still asleep. Different species need so many different days of warmth to really get moving. They're probably for the most part gone. But again, with our weather being up and down and getting some really good cold, I would probably leave all those little clusters of leaves in the garden. The grass, though, right now is greening and it is active. So if you do have big piles or spots that might be hampering the new grass that is growing, you could go out and quickly grab that. But again, we want that ground not to be squishy. And there were a couple of times in the last week where it was warm enough that we got the growth and it did dry out. There were a couple spots I was testing and they were dry. So, I mean, depending on what precipitation you've got in the last couple of days, depending on where you are in Canada or the US, head out, see if it's squishy and grab it if you can. But other than that, yeah, you don't need to do too much, especially if you're here in the GTA, Kelly. So remember, we've got our fall fertilizer, our winter fertilizer, still feeding and greening. The grass really isn't getting too thick, except for some of the really, really warm spots, like, against the side of a building or some of the weed grasses that are growing, which can be deceiving. So we're not quite ready for our spring fertilizer just yet. It'd probably wait another week or two. We're getting into the beginning of May proper.
Beginning of May, right?
Yeah, and because of the way the weather is, if it turns like it has, that we might already be there with that little burst that we've already had. So it might catch up in the beginning of May. We've seen the forsythia is out in a lot of spots, in a lot of the full sun spots, in all the little shade spots I check. They're almost in full bloom. So we're on the edge of that corn gluten pre-emergent for our crabgrass. We're kind of at the end of it. You could do it now.
Oh, end of it? I thought we could do it when it first started to bloom.
Oh, we want to do it before it blooms. Once it starts to bloom, it's going to end. We're getting to the point where the crabgrass is mature enough. We may not have, or we'll have a minimal effect or a little effect on it.
Okay, because I don't think it's blooming in my neighborhood. I'm going to double check.
So that's good. So just like you said on Instagram, right? Everybody has different gardens, different temperatures. So, if you are in a and that's why I like to check the shade spots. Because if you've got a shady lawn and there's a forsythia nearby in the shade, or you see it blooming, you probably still have a little bit of time going. But I have one just in my neighbor, and they're in shade, and they're about halfway bloomed, and their yard's in very full shade. So they're probably still okay. But those bigger, sunnier spots, where most of our lawn tends to be, we're kind of right on that edge of the end. So again, you can do it, but if we get that warmth and we continue to see this grass grow, we're going to be able to go out onto it where it's dry, it's not squishy or wet. it will be able to top dress in seed. So if you do corn gluten, remember corn gluten stops all the seeds from pre-emerging. It's a general pre-emergent. So
Right.
if you do put down corn gluten, you need to wait 5 to 6 weeks before we can put new seed, grass seed on for it to grow. So there's just that window. If you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of questioning it, but you're in a good spot, you might just let it go. If you're really bad, you've got lots of open soil and you start to see weeds still coming in and your grass is slow to moderate, even with the burst, if speaking for the GTA, depending on where you are, you may still want to put it on because you might be a little bit behind. But yeah,
Okay.
so rake, I would clear up the little patches as they start to dry out, and it's good to stay on or grab those out. I'd leave them in the gardens and
Mm-hmm.
just wait a couple more weeks for that food.
Okay. And the one thing I want to say about raking is raking is not to like lift up tons of expose a lot of soil. Like I think that's something, everybody is worried about the thatch and raking and exposing, like they want to see soil amongst the grass, so then they can put seed down. But really
Mm-hmm.
you're just leaving too much room for the wheat seeds. So it is meant to be a gentle thing. I don't think thatch is as big of a deal as, there's still plenty of time later in the season to kind of rake that out, especially
Yeah.
when the grass is actively growing. So yeah, so be gentle with the whole raking thing, right? Not like with a plastic rake or one of those, you're not trying to like create,
Yeah, when you
bare
drag your
earth.
yeah, when you pull your rake across your lawn, you don't want to see the tines with little wakes, like little jet skis with the water shooting out the back as soil, right? You don't want to rip it up so it just flares everywhere. Yeah,
Yes.
again, thatch is good. It's the way that lawn is going to help protect itself. It's going to fight some weed seeds. If you get really, really thick thatch that are blocking those crowns of that grass, that will become a little bit of an issue, where you're going to start to strangle those crowns, and that can be a problem. But if you're raking regularly and you do dethatch once every year and a half to 2 years, you should be okay. So, like you
Hmm.
said, you don't need to be digging in hard to get that soil exposed and take every little bit of thatch away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So, thank you so much, Kelly, for your question. Thank you very much. What other questions do we have? It looks like we have a few more. Sadie's written in, hello, Joanne and Matt. When is the right time to cut back on my garden plants to promote spring growth? Ooh,
That's kind of a tricky
I was
question.
just gonna say. What?
So Sadie.
Yes, send us what spring plants you'd like to
Yes.
promote growth
Well,
on. Are you
I
pruning?
would
Are
say,
you?
Sadie, the answer is no for anything that's spring. Yeah, so anything that's going to flower in the spring, I'll say this part, and you
Mm,
can add to it. So Sadie, if there's anything that's going to bloom this spring, like Wigelias,
lilacs,
lilacs,
our
thank you.
forsythia.
Forsythia, anything that's spring blooming, we don't want to cut it all, right? Maybe, if you've got something dead or if it needs to be, you've got some cross branches in the middle and that kind of thing. So spring flowering, we don't want to touch. If after it's flowered, then you can go ahead and cut them back. And really spring, would you classify that trimming now would encourage growth?
Not really, because everything's
Yeah.
still really kind of growing. We don't have the apical dominance in full effect like it does when we're pruning like another hedge, right? We
Hmm.
have that active growth to promote that. Everything's actively being promoted by itself anyways, because the
Hmm.
spring is coming and apical dominance hasn't fully set in yet. So
Say that word again.
apical dominance.
Apical. You guys heard that for
There-
here. Matt, is that in the book? Apical?
I have to flip to the back to our glossary.
I
Let's see if
We're gonna
apical
have to
dominance
spell
is.
that in our
I
show
think
notes.
I skipped apical dominance,
Okay,
but
we will put it in our show notes, whatever apical dominance means, but to everybody, that's the word for the garden tour. You guys can throw that around.
there you go. I see
But
apical.
yeah, so
Yeah.
Sadie, there's not really much. I mean, I think you can start to, like Matt said, if things are waking up in your garden, and you're seeing insects, then you can start cutting back, like the dead like ornamental grasses,
Mhm.
things like that, from and that standpoint of promoting new growth. But yeah, I think anything that needs to be kind of cut back from leftover from last year, if you still have the hosta, yucky like dried up leaves and things like that from past perennials, Some of the perennials, I say I'll leave them a little bit longer because I find you think that they're weeds, but then they're really, like, that happens to me with like coneflowers and rutabaga, right? They look like weeds, and then when you weed them out, you're like, wait a minute, where'd my plants go? So sometimes it pays to be a little bit slower so that you really, really know whether it's a weed or not.
That's right. And don't
Yeah.
forget your garden journal or taking pictures. If you've got pictures
Mhm.
from the past of where things are, that can help you too to, is that a
Yeah.
weed? Oh, nope, that was there last year. I forgot.
Yes, yes. So I
Yeah.
hope that answers your question, Sadie. And thank you for reaching out to us. And you can put your pruning shears down for a little bit.
That's right. Nancy's also written in, Joanne, do you speak Spanish now?
Gracias.
Yeah.
I let my husband do most of the talking. He's much better at the languages. So Glenn did
Oh,
all the
there you go.
talking.
Nancy
So
also says, is it healthy for climbing vines to be cut all the way back right now? Thank you for your advice. So you could prune out some of the vines if you really needed to, but no, we don't want to hack them all the way back
yeah.
to the ground. Annual ones, if they're dead again, and they're hanging out, go for it. Like you had said before, if we know as the things wake up and they're things that are crossing, or rubbing or diseased or dead, we can always remove those as well. With climbing roses, the third, fourth, or fifth year canes as they get old, or move beyond that fourth year really, and they become less productive, you can start taking out those. But for the most part, our woody vines, we're ready to kind of leave and let shape,
Hmm.
let them emerge. They're perennial, they've set wood, and it's more of a maintenance pruning that we're going to end up doing just as they kind of grow and sprawl, and kind of contain them to that area if we need to. But no, we don't need to necessarily cut everybody back all the way to the ground. Clematis is one of those ones that often get asked, do we need to prune it to the ground? And you want to make sure that you have a type 3 clematis or a group 3 that will just rejuvenate when you hack it to the ground, and it springs back up. But always make sure, if clematis is one of the ones you're thinking about, Nancy, you know the name. If you quickly Google the name, it'll tell you what group it is and how to properly prune that as well. But we also
Yeah.
did that in our book. So if you haven't got the
Right.
book, we do have
Yes.
it in our June section,
Yeah.
where we go through all of our clematis groups and when to prune them, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So take a
And
look there
if in
too.
doubt, don't prune it. Like, I think, you know what I mean? Because then that just sets everything back. So I
Yes,
think, if it was meant to be pruned, then you're going to notice that because the blooms will come, right? And then you can still remove some of the dead, that type of thing. At least you will get some blooms. So I think if in doubt, you know,
I love that saying, and I say that to almost everything, even beyond vines. When in doubt, don't.
yeah.
Just let it go. Let it tell you. Remember, there's no one magically flying around in fall and spring pruning our plants back. They know
Yeah.
what to do. Just trust their instincts, and then we can garden around them
Hmm.
or make the decision later after they give us a little bit more info.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's another case for taking photos, right? So that you remember, oh yeah, this one bloomed, this way last year. So this is what I should do, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
That brings us to Steve's quick comment. He says, "Hi, will Joanne post some of her pictures up from Spain online? Please do. Thank you."
Okay. I have on my personal page, but I don't know if I did on any on the on our down the garden path page on Instagram, but I will.
There you go. So join us at Down the Garden Path podcast on the Facebook group. You can join and continue the conversation after the radio show, see the posts and the pictures, and interact with us outside of our Monday night live show here on Reality Radio 101.
That's right.
Henry,
Yeah, Henry said, do you, and yes, my trip was amazing. Thank you. And do I have to add any compost or manure to my gardens now? How can you tell if you need these things? Thank you.
you could, again, Henry, I'd be watching for the ground squishy. You don't want to walk out on squishy soil in your garden or on your lawn to compact or compress the soil,
Hmm.
push the air spaces out. You'll do more damage than good, especially moving large amounts of soil by bag or whatever. So give it
Hmm.
some time, but you can add it in May, or even now again if that time is right. If the ground isn't very squishy, You can add a nice layer of 2 to 3 inches for compost. You'll see a lot of some of the perennials may have frost heaved slowly out of the ground. So you can see where the root zone is, and they kind of have that rounded flare to the root ball. So you might top up or dress around those. That's one way you could tell that you might need a little bit more soil. Outside of that, just knowing your soil structure. Do you have something that's very heavy clay? Here in the GTA, we have a clay loam. Clay is our natural clay loam soil. So we often have lots of clay. Or if you're in a very sandy or silty area, you might add some manure or compost with some good organic matter in there. And those humic substances the organisms let go will help bond everything and bind everything together. Or again, if you have clay, it'll help push away those clay particles.
Right.
So if you've got your soil texture, the other way is to do a soil test. If you haven't been really feeding or amending your soil in any way, you may not need it. You may have enough organic matter and other nutrients that are already there. But doing a soil test is another great way of just kind of taking a quick look at your soil, what nutrients it does and doesn't have. Well, is your organic matter high and low? And you can really read that to basically walk through what you need to specifically add to your soil to really give it back that health. So there are a few ways that you can do it, but it can also, again, it can also be a low fertility compost would make a nice mulch as well. So you could do something like the Fafard's Biofor, which is a clay breaker, lower in fertility, but again, as a nice little mulch layer to it and add some stuff to the soil. So
yeah, and it's adding compost or manure shouldn't be something you have to do every year. You know, it should be really something you can do maybe every other year, every third year. And I think you'll know if you see how your plants are doing, and if you see, you know, it's instead of having to worry about fertilizer. You know, you don't need to be out there with water soluble fertilizers to make your plants happy. It's really about feeding the soil with something organic, not something that's just going to run off, right? It rains and then that, you know, that soluble water is gone. So, or fertilizer is gone. So really and I think sometimes you notice people who are very keen to do it often, but then the problem is and this happens with lawns too, the gardens get higher and higher and higher, right? And you're covering a lot of base of the plants. So you really don't want to overdo it either. Too much of a good thing is not necessarily better. So, and I see that a lot with clients that over the years, you know, we've gone to do a new walkway or something like that, and their grass now is so high because over the years, every year they've added soil and added topsoil, and now that, you know, so we've literally had to resod the whole front because the grade is wrong, right? The water, now the lawn is higher than the grade the patio is going to be at, and so, and it, you know, it just happens slowly over time, so you don't really even notice it until something like that happens. But so yeah, so keep in mind it's something, you know, it takes a year for that to break down and go through the whole seasons and really help feed the roots of your plants. And if you're leaving your leaves on, your winter leaves and things to decompose in the winter too, that's also feeding your lawn, right? Or a garden.
Yeah, exactly. That's a source of organic matter for all those microorganisms to break down into smaller elements and give a really good feed. Indeed.
That's right.
As we hit 7:30 already, or half past the hour, it makes it a little bit more evergreen. Thanks for joining us here live on Reality Radio 101. I'm Matthew Dressing here with my co-host and co-author, Joanne Shaw, and you're listening to Down the Garden Path. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting and relevant topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from our research and from the wonderful guests that join us here on the show. Don't forget, you can spend more time with us down the garden path. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Down the Garden Path Podcast is our handle. You can also find us on your favorite podcast provider. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button to be notified of new content. And please don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment. We love hearing from all of you. You can always write us any time of the week. Down the Garden Path Podcast at hotmail.com is our email address. You can also find us on our websites with all of our social media content or links there as well. Joanne can be found at down2earth.ca, and you can find myself at naturalaffinity.ca. May in the garden It is here. May is just on our doorstep. We were just saying earlier, it feels kind of weird because it's April 24th and it's the last Monday in May.
I know. Yeah, it totally freaked me out though. I thought we had a different show tonight, so I was panicking a little bit. But it's like, oh no, this one's easy. It's in our book. So speaking of the book, I know we had our lawn questions off the mark, which we know are coming and everybody's keen. But in our book, we kind of start off with starting seeds and bulbs. And so I know there's a lot of people that might have been and I had my sons kind of taking care of my seeds in the basement, and I haven't been downstairs to look at it and see how they made out. So and I buy seeds every year and then I don't follow through and plant them. So I'm sure some of our listeners are curious as what to do and how to, when it's still a little early to start the hardening off period, right?
Yeah, you're going to harden them off, but we still have so many weeks before we're going to actually be able to plant them out. And again, we're speaking for Southern Ontario. So again,
Correct.
If you're further south in the United States listening, you may be beyond this process, or you might be right at the front door of starting to harden things off. And if you're somewhere like Winnipeg, you may not have even started your seeds yet.
Yeah.
So yes, we may not be quite at the hardening off level, but for those, if you're not sure, hardening off is basically us adapting our young seedlings who have grown indoors for that 24, 22 degrees under beautiful lights, maybe they're bottom heated. They've got perfect tropical conditions for them to be living in. And then we're going to shove them outdoors and it's like 10 degrees and they're going to freak right out. They won't take that adjustment or that crazy flip in temperature. They'll stress, they might get windburnt. They might have some sunburn as well if you put them out in full direct light. So hardening off is protecting them in a bright indirect lighting situation with some lower temperatures, not quite freezing temperatures. We usually want to see 10 degrees overnight, about 16 degrees during the day. We can put them out during the day only, bringing them in at night and giving them about 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the species as well of what we've got planting. That 1 to 2 weeks in and out. It is a little bit intensive labor depending on how many.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a labor intensive part of growing plants, but it's okay.
Yes.
If it saves you money, right?
Exactly. And after that 2 weeks, they should be out and have adapted to the up and down of that daytime temperature, adapted to the higher light, and then ready to be planted. So that is our hardening off. And we're going to do that not only with our seeds, but also any house plants we're going to move. Same thing applies to our house plants. So if you've got house plants you want to put outside for the summer, just like the seeds, don't want to put them in direct sunlight first. They're not used to it. They will burn. And we don't want to give them that overnight dropping. Tropical winters at 16 degrees Celsius. I will learn Fahrenheit, I promise our American listeners. So yes, we want to treat our houseplants this same way to harden them off as well.
Okay. Now, is it too late to start seeds?
No, you know what? I am just starting some seeds now. And remember, some seeds, like especially our root crops or things like corn, we don't want to start them indoors necessarily. They will be planted, or carrots. They like to be right outside. So
beets, yeah.
Beets, right. Some of the peas, the snap peas, things like that, beans, they may have some cold resistance to them. So they may, again, following your seed package instructions always for timing, you might have put some of them out already indoors. I know a few of my students have done that, and they have just some little growth coming out that's specific to that seed. So yeah, you may still be able to start your seeds indoors now. I still have one of my starting indoors. I still haven't planted a couple of them. Some tomatoes I have yet to plant.
Because tomatoes, they don't need to be, we don't need to start them super early, right? Because then they get too leggy. So we could still start some tomatoes.
Yep. I have a sweet pepper, like a habanana pepper. So it's like a habanero. It's got the flavor of a habanero, but no fire of the habanero pepper. Yeah, so I have those. I'm just starting, but again, we are in the GTA. We're still, I think, 5, maybe in the end of 6 weeks ahead of when we're going to be able to, or should be, planting outside. And in our area, a lot of people say June 1st, so that adds another week and a half. So looking at your seed packages, when is your frost date? And then the weeks before your frost date for your area. So we're still pretty good. We can still do few plantings of a few different things. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So yeah, so everybody who wants to even try it, I think it's almost better to start it later. Like I think you'll have more success because there's a lot less waiting. Like you get to go and just run with it, right? And then the weather's nice and you can start. Even the hardening off process is easier because it's later and it's warmer. I think it gets
Yeah,
to me it's the harder work is when you get them too early going and then you're trying to keep them alive inside and all the issues that come with something being leggy or something, having it just gets to be higher maintenance. So I think starting now is a good thing. And there's not even just food, there's flowers too, right? So some of your flowering plants you can start inside as well as direct sowing outside.
that's right. Lots of flowers. I'm going to grow a strawberry blonde marigold that I'm starting inside. I'm weird. I've got dandelions I'm growing inside for their flowers and their food. I've got some different verbenas. There's lots of things that you can grow flowers indoors, as well as herbs as well,
Yes.
right? Seeds,
Oh,
and you can
right.
create that
Yeah.
continuous harvest as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I bought nasturtiums because I know when we've had Nikki DeBoer on the show, I've never grown nasturtiums. And I think I bought them last year and then I left them, forgot to plant them and they died. So this year I bought them, but I still didn't grow them. So this time I bought some to grow. So when I find where I put my seeds, I will,
Yeah,
I will plant them.
I'll plant them.
I will
Nice.
plant
Yeah,
them. So yeah,
nasturtiums
so
are.
you should take a picture of your setup of when you start planting, and I'll do the same, and we can share with everybody on our Facebook group so they can see. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to. You just have to get it done, right?
Yeah, that's the main thing. Yeah, I think a lot of us get caught up in, oh my gosh, I can't do it. I don't have the right this. I don't have the right that.
Yeah.
The seeds, once they detect the right conditions, they're going to grow.
Yes.
They're programmed to do their thing. A little bit of light, a little bit of warmth, a little bit of water,
That's all
and
it
they're
needs.
out they
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just like anything. When you see other people posting these fancy dancy things, it can be very intimidating. But for the most part, it doesn't need to be at all. Keep it
no,
simple. Use
exactly.
the KISS method.
Yes. Speaking of planting things, you may have overwintered some non-hardy summer bulbs, like your
Right.
cannas and callas. You can
Mhm.
start potting them up now as well. So giving them a bright window, whether it's a north or a west, they're going to start to grow and get through some of that vegetative stage before they start to flower for their summer flowering. So you can put them out and they'll look a little bit more like you would buy one in the garden center. They're
Mhm.
of a size. They're started ahead of time.
Sorry,
So
when you say put them out, meaning putting them outside?
sorry. No, yes, thank you for the clarification. Putting them out of their little overwintering spot and potting them
Okay.
up and getting them ready. Sorry, you're not
Okay.
going to put them outside yet. If we get a freeze, they will still fall to the frozen soil.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. So we're going to just pot
Okay.
them up, and then again, we're going to just treat them like our house plants and our seeds. We'll just slowly put them outdoors
Okay.
and
So,
harden them off a bit.
so cannas, callas, dahlias,
Dahlias,
okay,
gladiolas,
gladiolas. Okay.
also anything that isn't hardy, winter hardy in your area.
Hmm.
So tulips and things like that. Again, that's a whole other topic, but
Right.
we shouldn't have any of those to put out. But
Right.
right
Right.
now, yeah.
Right. Okay. That's great.
So lots of time for seeds to be planted and started indoors.
That's right. So we've got another question from Katie. So she's enjoying the show tonight. Thank you, Katie. Um, is this is this a good time now to feed our plants with plant food? A question mark. And then in brackets she put commercial stuff.
Commercial stuff.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's like I'm not sure. I was like,
I'm
if
not
it's stuff
sure.
that you're seeing on commercials, Katie, or professional stuff. Yeah, I again, I think we go back to our preference for feeding. Although if she's talking about house plants, that's different too. So
Mhm.
yeah, so as far as feeding our plants outside, um, doing some compost and some manure, the beginning of May as the soil warms up a little bit, it's a good time, and that's the best way to really feed your plants. Um, but not sure if you are meaning house plants because the spring would be a good time, right, Matt, to start fertilizing.
Yeah, as the days grow longer, those tropical house plants are noticing it, and they're going to start activating those roots and shoots, and they're going to start to fatten up and grow. So you can definitely be feeding them. Katie, I was wondering, as you say commercial stuff, do you mean like synthetic versus organic fertilizers? I'm not sure. But yeah, house plants most certainly. Outdoors, um, if it's dormant, they're not really feeding much. So, I mean, if they're dormant, you don't need to worry about starting a heavy fertilizing regime or
Mm-hmm.
program yet. Just wait till they show you some growth, then they're actively moving, and then they would
Mm-hmm.
be looking for some food. But indoor houseplants, most certainly, we usually say from about April to October. So I say, like Easter time to Thanksgiving or Canadian Thanksgiving, all the way around through the summer. So the summer months, that's usually when our days are longer, sun's intense, they're actively growing. Every 2 weeks is perfectly fine. And then usually about once a month through the winter, from October back through the winter to April, once a month is usually good with the lower lights and the less activity. But yeah,
Okay.
you could be feeding, just see if they're ready for food. Are they
Yeah.
dormant or not?
Well, that makes me wonder about so yeah, we have that graphic. We always worried. Remember when we wrote the book about, do we have this graphic too many times where we say fertilizing, if it's dormant, don't feed it. We have it like all over. But when I flip to our evergreen trees and shrubs section, we do talk about granular fertilizers to feed them. So is that something that May? So we kind of say, I would think it's a little bit more till the end of May, right, when things are really starting to grow. So we say begin to feed your trees and shrubs, evergreen trees and shrubs, when you see new growth emerging. Granular fertilizers feed over 4 to 8 weeks. So, it's a slow release, right, over the summer. That
Yeah.
the end of May is the time to do that type of thing.
Yeah, so once we see a lot of our trees, especially here again in the GTA, a lot of our trees have flowered. So the maples are out, the magnolias are out. They're pushing out their flowers. They're not necessarily growing new shoots, leaves
Mm,
yet. So they're not really super hungry yet. They're going off their reserves. So we still have a couple weeks to go. But once we start to see some true leaves starting to emerge, there's that point where she's starting to generate lots of new growth, and we could start feeding it. So we could use our granular fertilizer, put that down, and then again feeding that sorry, not two, feeding that 4 to 6 weeks depending on who you've got, and maybe even
right.
up to 8 weeks depending on who you've got as a granular fertilizer, right? Or
Okay.
again every 2 weeks. With a tree and shrub water soluble fertilizer into the canopy, or sorry, the drip line at the edge of the canopy area where most of the active roots are growing. And then
Hmm.
for our bigger trees and shrubs, we can stop feeding them about Canada Day or July 1st. So when we get to the big holidays in
July in
July,
the garden.
yeah, July in the garden, we can stop doing our fertilizer because we don't want to. Fertilizer is going to encourage new growth. We don't want new growth going into the winter. And we want to give it time to harden off and thicken up and
Yeah.
slow down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't really recommend the garden spikes. We know everybody kind of likes them because they feel like they know what they're doing, and they know where
Yeah.
they are, and they can see when they dissolve and stuff. But it really is so concentrated, right? And it's not necessarily the drip line where we want to water things. Again, you can refer to the book that where we kind of show you the articles on, or the references for the drip line for our plants and trees and shrubs. So that's something what we really would advise not doing, right?
Yeah, the tree spikes. And I wish I could find the report. But I saw a paper out of Guelph. It was probably like 12 or 14 years ago now for me. But yeah, they did a study where they had the tree spikes go into the ground, and they basically dissolve outwards and start falling down. So they basically look like a rocket going out into space with a big tail that just slowly widens the further it goes away. So you're just getting that nutrient concentration going straight down in a cone. So if the roots aren't there, you're just feeding parts of it. Yeah.
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 So I'd rather
Yeah.
do granular, or again, like we've said, like a water or tree injection system, have an
Hmm.
arborist come out and properly
Yep.
root our
Yep.
trees and
Yeah.
shrubs.
Or yeah, Ross root feeder, if that's something, if you have a lot of trees, or let's say a cedar hedge that you really want to
Yeah.
fertilize and look after, then investing in, it's like a little gadget with a spike at the end with holes in it. And you hook it up to your hose, and you put the fertilizer tablets in the top and the handle, right? And then you're basically pushing it down. So now you're really watering the roots. You're watering them, and you can do it for watering purposes, but you can also
Hmm.
do them adding the fertilizer. So even if you didn't want to add fertilizer, it's a good way to do deep watering as well. So it's a handy gadget to have. Not
Yes.
that cost prohibitive,
Nope.
and and you can use it for a long time. and on a variety of different things. So yeah, so that's something, especially because, people put in like big cedar hedges. It isn't a huge investment, and you don't want like sections of them or individual ones to die. So you want to make sure that but they also tend to need less love than people give them. I think a lot of cedar hedges, just like houseplants, we kind of kill them with kindness.
Yes, you and I both know from the garden center the main plant return is because they gave it too much love.
Too
Nature
much
didn't
love.
do it; it was too much love.
Yes.
Yes.
Or they brought them back too soon. They
Yes.
hadn't
Yes.
leafed out yet. So we, hardy hibiscus, rose of Sharon's, they are not dead. Do not bring them back. Do not dig them out. I in our Instagram post, I also said, you got to give it till June. Don't think that if something May 15th, May long weekend hasn't leafed out or bloomed yet or grown or shown it, leave it alone. Give it a couple more weeks. And I think remembering that, your friends, it's blooming in my friend's garden, or it's blooming in my neighbor's garden across the street. Well, that neighbor's getting a different amount of sun than you're getting. So there's lots of variables. You don't know how much soil and whatever, if there's concrete, if it's close to the house, like you said earlier, right? That area is hotter. That's going to grow first versus a shadier side. So that's the one tricky thing about gardening is there's so many variables. So please, no digging anything up and returning anything until at least the first week of June. That's when you really will know, and you'll be shocked at what just pops in one day overnight. Everything pops. So many of the things that we had in our first gardens, right, were things that people returned, uh, that really weren't dead. The ornamental grasses that really weren't dead. The Rose of Sharon's and the hardy hibiscus. So yeah, the hardy hibiscus, I think I'd almost wait till July, but.
Right?
Yeah,
I've seen them. Yeah. They start like mid to end of June.
Yeah, for sure.
Crazy.
You've got to give them lots of time. So that's why you have to hide them with other plants. So yeah. So everybody be patient. That was my biggest focus today and my Instagram post.
Yes, and echo that as well. Just be patient. It's just not quite time. We've been teased and we're excited.
That's right.
The only other thing I would say about the Ross root feeder, be careful, just a safety thing. They work wonderfully. I love them, absolutely. Watch when you're putting it into drier soil or when you do insert it, turn the water on slowly when you push it down so that it enters the soil softer. But if you just jam it right in there, you'll very quickly compact the soil around the spike that's going to release the fertilizer. And if you turn it on or the water, if you turn it on the full, the pressure is so hard that it'll just slide it right back out. And I've seen people get hit in the jaw and the nose because it goes from 0 to 100.
Oh no!
Goes straight out. So lean over and just let it drip into a soft spot slowly. So take a minute to let it get in, but then slowly crank her. But she will feed the water beautifully.
Yes. Yeah. I haven't used mine in the last couple of years, so I think I definitely need to get it out this year and give some love to a few things. But I do get, I do have an arborist come and fertilize things in the fall and put, well, not the organic fertilizer. They put the aluminum. Is it the aluminum? No, or magnesium? What do they put down?
The aluminum sulfate that lowers the pH to turn them blue. Is that what you're thinking of?
No, not that.
Or
I think it's the magnesium because of the salting, because of me having the
corner
lot and all my garden has a lot of exposure to the salt for our walkway. So I was getting a lot of damage to my leaves, looking very caloric and stuff. And so Richard thought that that would help. So they come in like winter, like November, with it looks like blowers, and they blow all the magnesium onto, and that's really has helped my Japanese maple, all of my Japanese maples and my hydrangeas. It definitely, I've seen the benefit of that. So yeah, I was damaging, but it's hard. You need to be safe to walk to your front door. It's like such a quandary when I unfortunately have the corner lot having that big walkway. So it's a long walkway. So yeah, so that has definitely helped. So any other questions you have for me in the garden, you can send us now in the last couple of minutes, or definitely post in our Facebook group for us and we can answer you. Or even better, it makes a wonderful Mother's Day gift, which I've also been promoting on social media, but picking up a copy of our Down the Garden Path workbook that will just, again, it's broken down just like our show segments, month by month, what to do, what not to do in the garden. If we keep getting a ton of rain, then please stay off the garden, stay off the grass, that type of thing. So we really keep it practical. And as far as our stepping stone stuff, Matt, I thought we haven't given enough love to our favorite plants. I know. So I thought I would talk about my cat's pajamas catmint, because I mentioned that I saw catmint blooming in Spain as well. So it's a great little flower. It's the first to bloom in the garden. It's compact. It reblooms. And even though it's not a native plant, it does attract a ton of pollinators. And I personally love that periwinkle blue. So that's my garden favorite for the month of May in our book. And how about yours?
Mine is the Yuki cherry blossom deutzia. Just a nice 2 feet tall, 2 foot wide, nice soft medium green leaf. Blooms pink blossoms over the low mounding shrub with nice little white margins and a little pink fleck, and then beautiful purple color in the fall for our fall color. So lots of rich cherry blossoms right about now, or about to be now, as it warms up through May. I'm still thinking we're in May. As we get into May, and then some nice rich fall color. But there are lots of lovely plants yet to arrive at your garden center. So enjoy.
One of the other things that we don't talk about in our book, I don't think, and that it is kind of time now. I noticed a post from our friends at the Environmental Factor that now, with the rise in the last couple of years of the LDD moths, right now, they're suggesting it's time, the spongy moth caterpillar. So it's time to check your trees. So are the spongy moth caterpillars the same as the LDD?
No, I think they are a slight difference, if I remember correctly, but I might be wrong.
Okay. Well, regardless, we don't want any of those caterpillars. So they're saying at the end of April through mid-May, larvae will begin to hatch. So at this stage, the larvae are hungry and looking for leaves to consume. So they have a new V9, sounds like for a car, V9 tree belt that can be wrapped around any tree. So I'm sure you've seen some people, you can make it with, for the LDD moths or the gypsy moths, as they used to be called, with duct tape and burlap. There's a different, Google it, there's a different things. But if you do have trees in your area, you do want to keep an eye and see if there's any insect sacks, that you can start to scrape off and dump into a bucket of soapy water. So now is a good time to catch it before those things start to hatch or to grow.
That's right. Yes, I can think of many trees that are out there that are just filled with them. They're just filled with those eggs in all of our public spaces. So
yeah, and it's tricky because I know you can only really get to as far as you can reach, that you never can get to all the ones up in the top, but you might as well, you do what you can do, right? I think everybody can do. But the one thing, the way the belt works is because even the ones that you can't see up in the trees, they do drop right? They just drop down in the night and overnight in the ground, and then they go back up into the trees. So that is why the belt works, because it's not like once they're up there, they stay up there. They actually do drop down to be cool in the lawn overnight and then go back up again. So yeah. So yes.
So take a look. If you know you've got them, you've got some work to do.
And we've got one last question from Frank. He's asked about an herb garden. So is it too early to start a herb garden outside here in the GTA? I think it's a little early. I think you can probably start them inside, Frank, and get them going, because they usually tend to germinate pretty quickly, don't they, Matt?
Yeah, they'll grow pretty quickly. Pretty good. So you could definitely start them by seed. Again, if we get up to that 16 degrees, if we get some really warm days again, you could put some of them outside, or put some potted plants that maybe you bought outside for sure. But yeah, it would be too early to start them. Completely
or if you go, because sometimes they are one of the first things that garden centers do bring in, because they are keeping them outside because they've already been hardened off. So I think that is, if you buy them at the garden center and they're already outside, then that is something that you could, keep outside. So really it depends on how you do it. So yeah.
And then just watch that nighttime temperature. Yeah. And that was one of my other thoughts, as you say that, Actually, remember too, if you're not starting seeds, you could buy a lot of the plants already started from your garden center. But the weird and cool, different, little bit of outside of the box kind of stuff shows up a couple weeks before the May 2-4 weekend. So
Mm,
don't, or whatever your final last frost date is.
mhm,
Usually the garden centers will have it a couple weekends before then. So
mhm,
start looking a week or two ahead of your final last frost date to get the weird and wonderful tomatoes and peppers and
mm,
eggplants and whatever. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, the staples will be in stock, but some of the outside interesting, different, weird ones
Interesting things.
will be gone
Yes. Yes.
for sure.
Yes. Interesting. Interesting.
Dave also just said, fantastic show tonight down the garden path. So thank you as
Thank you,
well,
Dave.
Dave, and everybody else who's written us in and who tuned in. We're glad to be back and live. Speaking of back, don't forget well, I don't know what that was, but a week segment or segue. Don't forget you can support us as well on Patreon and YouTube. So you can show some love with
YouTube.
us on Patreon. And don't forget YouTube as well. We've moved over to YouTube. So all of our past shows, or as we release new shows, they will be out on YouTube. So you can go back in time. Maybe you're not a podcast listener. Maybe you're listening live, but you play on YouTube a lot. You can find past episodes there as well as your favorite podcast providers. And don't
Mm-hmm.
forget, continue the conversation with us or say hi or share or like our stuff. Join us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Down the Garden Path Podcast is our handles there.
Mm-hmm. And I was gonna say, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second to say the Patreon part is buy us a coffee, or for $10, the $10 level would be after tonight's show, like after the month of the in the garden show, you have us on Zoom for 10 minutes, or sorry, for half an hour or so, to ask us questions, show us pictures, get advice from us as far as we're also landscape designers. We love your design dilemmas, so so for $10 you get 2 landscape designers for a half an hour. We think it's a great deal. So we'd love to see some faces for a change. So yeah, so that's just something to, we think there's great value there, and we'd hope you would too, especially as we get going into the gardening season.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. With that, that's the end of our show. So don't forget to stay tuned next week. We have, and I'm going to maybe mispronounce her last name, but Katie Tomoni from Monrovia joining us on May 1st to talk about some plants. And then we're joined by Kathy Jentz on May 8th to talk about her newest or latest book, Ground Cover Revolution. So some interesting plant-focused topics in the weeks to come. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in here live, or if you're listening at home to the recording, we appreciate you too. You're listening to Down the Garden Path here live on Reality Radio 101, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your hosts Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.